All right, people, welcome to the Performance Playbook podcast. Today, I've got the one and only Kraig Adams. Kraig, how you doing?
Doing great here in Brooklyn, New York. I've got coffee. Happy to chat.
Hell yeah. So I think this has been an exciting podcast for me. I was waiting to reach out because I was like, all right, well, this guy's got some swagger to him, so I'm going to ease my way into someone like this. But I think the cool part for me is before I went to Tokyo, I was obsessed with your videos. And so I'd watch your videos because they would kind of calm me down. And then for a whole year, I kind of like planned out this backpacking trip for after. And it was because of your videos I was able to kind of get an idea of what to do, how to do it, and I got inspired. Can you explain to us maybe what got you inspired, if it was your parents, or what got you into the backpacking world?
Yeah. So I guess you're referring to my YouTube channel where I'm uploading silent, solo, usual hiking videos all over the world. I haven't been hiking like I am making videos about for too long. It's been about 3 years now. But I've always loved the outdoors, and I've always been making videos. And I was making New York City vlogs and vlogs when I would travel, and around the cities it was just a little too crazy. So I finally got into my rhythm and happy place in the mountains. And I was a terrible hiker back then when I started. So you can go all the way back to like my first hiking videos and compare it to now and see that experience grow over the time. So, it's been a long journey, but I was definitely inspired just to go out and do what I wanted and just document that happening, I guess.
Yeah, so you originally started in filmmaking for weddings, and then from the weddings, you went into kind of the YouTube and vlogging space, and then that kind of just transformed into the silent solo hiking.
Yeah. Weddings was a lot of shooting other people, the brides and grooms, all over the city and all over the world. And I made a YouTube channel teaching people how to do what I did. But I eventually just got tired of that industry and wanted to do more travel stuff. So, I've definitely shifted my audience over the years. So yeah, definitely weddings, then vlogging and filmmaking like Casey Neistat, and then more nature and travel to where we are right now.
Was there anything specific that kind of had that light bulb moment for you? Like, hey, I should really try filming this specifically solo and kind of see what happens.
Yeah, I had never hiked by myself before, and it's definitely a different vibe than when you're going and eating and traveling around cities with friends and other vloggers. There's a lot of forced happiness and everything's cool and fun and adventurous. But when you're out there alone hiking with just your backpack for 3 or 4 days straight, it kind of gets a little lonely and somber, and it's a different vibe. So I just tried to portray that different pace change in my videos, and that's where the silent aspect and the slower, longer shots and the tripod filmmaking style came from, I guess.
Yeah, I think my favorite part about it was the fact that you could kind of put in your own mental aspect of what you were doing. So like the silence kind of you were able to like cultivate how you felt about the film without being kind of pressed through any type of obviously the music that you would kind of throw in there would add into like the serenity of it. But it was just so beautiful to kind of like build what was going on and almost sometimes what you were thinking. It was just kind of such a beautiful way to look at things. It was so different because, in this kind of faster paced media, it's different to have something so slow. What was like the specific moment? Was it that the Iceland hike that it all started to like pop off for you and things started traveling in a good way?
Yeah, I'd say the Iceland video was one of the first where I leaned into that format, and probably perfect storm of good thumbnail and the watch time just kind of hit and recommended it more and more to more people on YouTube. So that video went viral in a way that I'd never seen before. And I think it took about a month or two. It was just playing out as normal. I think it had maybe 20, 30,000 views, which was standard. And then about a month or two later, I was out hiking in the Adirondacks in New York, and I came off trail and everything had gone crazy. Amount of comments and the views, and then other videos alongside were getting watched as well. So I think that video was up to 1 million within a week or two after that. And I felt the momentum. Momentum is a good thing. So I was like, okay, scrap this side video I was working on. I got to go do something bigger and more of what people were expecting from that success of Hornstrandir in Iceland. And so I went to hike in the Alps, in the Swiss Alps. And I think the format kind of found itself once I did the second video, similar to the Iceland one. And the subscribers, grew to expect that, and it just kind of worked.
Yeah. It's kind of, maybe for me watching, but it's kind of crazy that like you almost, if not, you created your own genre in the YouTube space. Was that kind of surreal for you to kind of put all those pieces together and have it be yours?
Yeah, I definitely took bits and pieces from different places. I remember being inspired by primitive technology on YouTube, which was a guy alone in the Australian outback just building mud huts and stuff, but he just had locked down tripod shots and he never talked. I thought that was cool. So I was like, that, but for hiking would be interesting. And I'm sure different things that I watch have inspired me over the time. It's definitely, it's a format. A genre, a format. I've been seeing that as the vehicle for success for a lot of YouTubers. Once they find something that works, that resonates as a product for an audience, doing it again and again and again, maybe slightly different, but just setting that expectation for your audience so that they already know what they're going to get before they click on the thumbnail, but it delivers that plus some, every single time.
Yeah. How's that been watching people now kind of replicate and copy, and just they were so inspired that they felt like they had to do it themselves?
Hey. Shh. We've got a mini Australian Shepherd over here in guard mode. Yeah, it's been great. I definitely encouraged people to use the format and share their own hikes. There's only something, there's nothing wrong with that. It was good to build a community at that point for growth. Yeah, a lot of people have been doing the same tripod shots, the silent walking around. It's been fine. Yeah. As much as I can, I just focus on my own stuff though.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cause like in the athletic world, right? If you had someone that was very inspired by you and they said, well, I tried to, for me, it would be like, I love how you did this dive. And so trying to replicate or do it like you is like been my goal. And like hearing that for me is kind of cool because I remember looking up and going, well, I want to be like these people. And so I was just trying to see if there's kind of a similar connection. Obviously, yours is on such a mass scale. Mine's pretty niche, but to have so many people so inspired to post videos and then throw your name out there, yo, check this out, should be kind of at least for me, it was kind of cool to look at and see how popular that got.
Yeah. I don't think there's really any way to control it. All I can control is how I react to it.
Yeah.
And I can see the positive. So yeah, I'm definitely a little different than most creators. Like I'm not really going to go out of my way to build community in the way that I see others. I understand the positive aspect of like replying to everything and making, clubs and having like a Facebook group and just like doing meetups and all these things. But yeah, but I can still acknowledge that, people can copy and it's fine.
Yeah. How's it feel kind of having this become your job and, your main source of income is just kind of, it'd be the goal for me is to be an athlete for the rest of my life. And so, you've kind of turned your passion and love for hiking into your source of income. How's that feel?
Yeah, it's great. I need to remind myself not to lose sight of like how good things are. I feel like I've done this. I've been working for myself and being a YouTuber and Instagram content creator for so long that it would almost be impossible to have a normal job.
Mm.
I don't know. So I feel like I'm in it for the long run. So looking at it down the road, like what it looks like 3 or 5 years from now, is a little difficult. And I guess that's what I'm focusing on. But yeah, it's pretty great to be able to have the freedom to not only make content for an audience, but like the content and trips and videos that I want to make and find a way to monetize it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's always like split moments for me. When like I'm on a trip, for example, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, wow, like because of the work that I've done, I'm getting flown out to this part of the world and I get to do my sport and like enjoy the fruits of that labor that's been put in. And it's like, you get to look at the same thing for you. It's like, hey, because of, these creative things that I've done, I can go hike all over the world for work, but it's like it's hard to call it work, at least for me. It's like it's I get to have paid play, all over the world, and it's just like such a cool thing to have and try to cultivate, your happiness around that and be like, hey, like this is something special that at least for diving, mine's gonna have to end. My body's screaming at me to stop. But it's cool to have that for you. It's trying to have that longevity piece is super, super exciting, and it's you're playing for work. It's sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my interests have changed over the years. And I guess one thing that I'm kind of figuring out is how to do I want to shift my interest to the next thing and just kind of abandon if I'm not as interested, or do I just try to make more of a product? And it's strange that hiking and traveling for me has changed over the three or 4 years that I've been doing it.
Mm.
And the amount of like it just shifts, it changes. Like, do I really want to go to a place that I go to shoot and film? Is it like a product? Do I feel like I'm just going to get a lot of value out of it for my YouTube channel? Or do I just need to make more of an effort to like realize that this is fun? It's, a cross section of work and fun, and, it should be fun.
Yeah.
Sasha, come here. Come here. Come.
Get her in the podcast.
This is her.
Hey.
This is Sasha.
What's up, Sash?
There's another dog in the hallway that she's very concerned about.
Oh, I'm dead. So when it comes to these trips, what's like the planning look like? Because some of these trips that I've watched are super elaborate. At least it looks elaborate, like the 100-mile hikes and trying to have all these locations in between. What's that process look like before you go on it?
Yeah, I've definitely gotten much better at this over time. And even today, I was reflecting on some of my past trips and how terrible and horribly planned they were.
Yeah.
But yeah, because you could just pick a place and go and just hope for the best, that it's fun. One, that it's like not, there's the weather. Is this the best time to see the place? Like it might be dry, but it might be, right after winter and nothing is green. So the timing of when you visit these places is so big. And you could just disregard that by just going to a place because you have a plane ticket. And then there's how long do you spend on a trail? So if it's 40 miles, like you could do that in 2 days or 4 days. And those two trips are going to be very different as far as what you bring, how much you eat, how much time you have to film, and just how fun it is if you're just like sitting around bored versus like, I don't know. And it could rain on one of those 4 days instead of if you just did it in 2. So there are so many questions. And I guess this aspect isn't shown as much in my videos. And I've been trying to do guides to help people like you go on these hikes as well. But you're right. Yeah, the research is so big. And for every hike, every trip, I do this research.
Yeah.
And then there's like figuring out of the list of 100 places you could go to, like what's the low hanging fruit of at the top of the list. You know, it's like, do you go to a place that's more popular and like people might search it on Google more to get more views on YouTube, or do you go to a place and kind of make it newly discovered, researching other people who have made videos on a hike as well? Oh man, there's like so much that goes into the research.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible because especially looking at some of the hikes that you've done, especially in the more remote places, I got to experience what bad planning looks like because I got inspired by your trip, but I was like, it was just I was driving from Indiana all the way back to California, and I was like, what would be a cool spot? I saw your video on the Sawtooth Mountains, and I was like, well, I just want to do like one little piece of that. So I went and backpacked Thompson Peak, but like I didn't research where I needed to park, what the weather was looking like. There was fires apparently that happened, so it was like really hazy while I got there. There was all these pieces that I just kind of was like, we'll just see what happens. And I guess for me that's fine because you know I'm just going for fun and trying this thing for a first time. But when it comes to, you know, you got to play into like aesthetics, how many people are going to be there, so it gets so much more in depth. Are you utilizing like travel guides or like, you know, specific people in those areas to like help you build out these trips, or is it just sole research on your own?
Yeah, I'm definitely a teach myself kind of person. And as much as I can, I'll hike extra miles or go at different times to avoid crowds or to avoid the need for guides or reservations or anything like that. So yeah, so much planning.
Yeah.
I'm glad you got to the Sawtooth, but yeah, I can imagine because you could go to the same place and one could be wildfire haze and not, and it's a completely different experience.
Yeah, thankfully by the time I got to the top, near the peak, it kind of like cleared out, but it was just the funniest experience for me because so many bad things ended up happening. Like, thankfully by the time I got to the top and there was this little stream I could get water from, because like ran out of water. The the sleeping bag I got it came up to my nipples, and it got really cold that night. And so, because I assumed like I'm like 5'6", I'm not that tall. I saw centimeters online. I was like, I'll just click this. And so there's just a lot of dumb things that I did, but it's kind of, I guess, one of the most important pieces, because now when I go back out, like I learned from all of these pieces. What have been some just like astronomical oopsies that you've made backpacking?
Yeah. So much of what you just said comes down to the weather forecast and understanding what 30 degrees feels like compared to 50 degrees as a low for the night and what you bring, because you know you could prepare for everything, but you're going to have a bad time because your pack is heavy.
Yeah.
And it's not fun to carry a heavy pack when you don't use the stuff. It's extra bad. So yeah, I remember one comes to mind, Acantango, I believe, in Guatemala. It's like an active volcano that you can hike up to. Beautiful views. But it was so jungly and warm down at the base where I was sleeping the day before, that I was like, I don't need a sleeping bag. I can just bring a liner. You know, it's hot. Like I'm sweating. It's a jungle. But, you know, you go up a couple thousand feet, it's way different. So just like you, I was shivering in the night probably. And I remember putting everything on me and then also taking my hyperlight backpack and putting that over my feet and legs just to have a little bit of extra warmth, like every inch and every amount of warmth I could make. That was a cold night. And the volcano was loud. It kept erupting, so I didn't sleep that much.
Oh, yeah, that's the worst. That was one of the things that thankfully I had the liner. So I put the liner over my head and I just turned onto my stomach so I could just find some warmth.
And then you get the carbon dioxide poisoning. I've definitely, turtled directly inside stuff before, but yeah, you need to remember to breathe oxygen every so often.
Yeah. So you've accidentally had too little is kind of what you're saying. That's been one mistake. Have you done that? So it was kind of colder. I've seen you've been in like crazy cold climates. I'm assuming you're a little bit more careful in those situations to maybe pack a little bit more.
Yeah. Like I said, I've learned so much. So the newer hikes, I have my stuff dialed down. I'm more of a diva than ever before. I just don't want to have a bad time. So I will carry a little extra, and I will know exactly what I need just from experience and research and planning. And like I said, the weather and the forecast comes down to this so much. But yeah, the really high altitude stuff, like maybe Nepal, where you're hitting passes that are at 17,000 feet, which is higher than anything in the US by a long shot. That's when you need maybe a second pair of socks. You need a different type of shoes. You need like different types of gloves. Like, yeah, there's just another layer when it comes to summiting peaks like Kilimanjaro or going over passes in Nepal. But then you just do them quick, and then once you get over the other side, it's warm again. So
Yeah.
a brief thing.
Have you had any kind of learning curves outside of the packing side of maybe like getting lost on a hike or kind of just making a move that felt pretty novice that you don't make in today's hikes?
I have never really gotten lost just because the iPhone has GPS even on airplane mode. So if you have downloaded maps, it's very easy to know where you are at all times. And if you're tracking, you can see your line of where you go. And if you have a map, a trail, like a line to do, it's like you're just following a line. So that's easy. I would guess yeah, some of these trails are hard to get to and hard to get away from. So maybe just being kind of street smart with coordinating taxis or hitchhiking. Hitchhiking in the US is a bit easier than, well, I've just been lucky. I've hitchhiked in all around the world and I've always had a good time. One thing that I've done more and more is reaching out to subscribers to like pick me up and drop me off as trail angels, which, we'll joke that they're like, a glorified Uber, but they're very happy to do so. And I'll buy them coffee and buy them food and stuff.
Yeah.
But getting to and from the trailheads can be a little tricky, especially in international when it's like farmland. In Mexico, I had to like rent a car and drive to a trail. It's kind of wild sometimes.
Yeah. So some of those larger trips that you've gone on too, I've seen that you've brought in like a duffel bag that you would stash. Where do you end up putting like your extra stuff? Because I know you've got camera gear and all this other stuff. How do you do that? How do you protect it?
Yeah, for the big hikes, I'll bring out I think like 100-liter Patagonia duffel. But that's just the big international ones. Usually I'm carry on for flights just because I'm trying to stay light in general. And I used to be concerned about where to store my stuff during hikes. I was very confused about it, so I totally get it. But it's very easy. It's just hotels before and after. I used to just like overbook hotels, and I'd book my hotel for when I got back to a city. So if it's a round trip, I would book days in advance and then talk to them and be like, look, I've booked. Can I store this here? And they'd usually be okay. But to be honest, if you're kind and respectful, you can sweet talk yourself into most hotels or places storing your stuff. Like I just got back from New Zealand and I stayed at a hotel and then went on like a 2 or 3 day hike. But beforehand, I just talked to the woman and she was like, yeah, fine. I think she assumed that I would stay again because when I came back 3 days later to pick up the duffel bag, she like handed it to me. I'm like, thank you so much. She's like, so are you going to get a room? I'm like, no, thank you. And I just left. So you just got to be like respectful and kind. And if you need to just overbook hotels, I guess. Yeah. I think I've stashed, I can't remember the example exactly, but I think I've hidden stuff as well. I want to say in like Thailand or something. I don't know.
Like on the trail, or like kind of.
Yeah, I think I had like a waterproof thing at one point. I just like found a bush. Like I can't remember if it was a hike or just something else. And maybe I was like going to the airport later that day, and I didn't want to walk around the city with it. That could be a little sketchier, but yeah.
But it worked. Nice. Just to jump back though, what would be like 3 key things for someone to look out for when they're planning a thorough trip, such as like going to Nepal? Like, what would be hey, you definitely need to look for X, Y, and Z. Obviously, maybe one of them is you've got to look at the weather, but what would be those 3 things for you?
Yeah, I even before you get there, the flight, the visa. So as an American, sometimes I've just assumed that I can do whatever I want, and there's nothing worse than arriving at a country and not being able to get in because you didn't fill out the visa paperwork or whatever. So that's one. That's simple. 2, some hikes, especially in Nepal, they require insurance, and that's another layer of research that you should do. Just requirements to do. Some hikes require a guide, some don't. Yeah, so just the red tape beforehand. Like we talked about, the weather forecast, the season that you're hiking in, as well as fires, like you mentioned. That's a big thing in the US to always watch out for. And as well as avalanches. So I was going to do the Annapurna hike, I think 2 years ago in Nepal, and had to postpone because there was an avalanche that just wiped out part of the trail in the high section and made it impassable. So if I had started that hike without doing that research, or took the advice of anyone telling me not to go, I would have had a bad time. It probably would have been dangerous too.
Yeah. So then there's the pieces before, but while you're on the backpacking routes yourself, and it's like, I guess it's more so for you that you're going solo, what are like the best ways to, we'll go in quotes, like be safe while you're doing it? Like, hey, let's not be stupid, so maybe have a downloaded map of the route, but like, what are some specific things you make sure you do to be like safe on your trips?
Yeah, I think the map is easy. Once you do it once, you just always have it downloaded. So the backup for that is to make sure you have enough battery. So if your phone runs out of battery, so that's just knowing the devices you have, the charge times. I, like the back of my hand, know how long a Sony Z battery is going to give me if I'm filming, and my phone and stuff like that. Almost everything I have is rechargeable, and I just make sure to have a brick for backup. So that'll keep me safe if I have battery, because I'm depending on electronics. But more so, I would say just food and water. Like one of the most, like the thing that would happen to me is I would get a headache, and that would affect my distance. It would affect like how well I could deal with any problems that come in front of me. I'm not really worried about like falling or tripping or stuff like that, but I'm more so worried about just like getting, sick and having a headache. So knowing how many calories, what food, having safe water to drink, filter water, bottled water, out of like a catadine. So you said you were trying to struggle to find water at one point. Did you have a filter?
Yeah. Thankfully, I had a filtered one. I was copying some of your gear, and so there was a glacier pond that I just scooped up and then had that filtered water, which was clutch.
Yeah, but also just like knowing that you can do that, or if you have to melt snow, like do you have to boil it or not, and just all of these things. Like, yeah, I think the worst water I've ever drank was in Hong Kong for some reason. It was very dry, and it was definitely still water that was a little scummy. So we boiled it. We boiled it so much. Yeah.
What about when it comes to nature? Because I've watched one of yours where you were in Alaska, right? It was a 100-mile Alaskan hike. You're dealing with a lot of wildlife. What are some precautions that you utilize there?
Yeah, I have felt pretty safe everywhere except Alaska. It is a different beast up there. I think I saw a bear every 5 miles,
Oy, oy, oy.
and sometimes they'd follow you, and they're big. And once again, it depends on when you go. I think bears treat you differently during different seasons, if they're hungry or not. And um, yeah, knowing how to approach bears if you see them. In Alaska, I had a flare and bear spray, and people were still telling me that that wasn't enough. Like, people hike with guns in Alaska because of the bears and the elk or the moose. I can't remember. It's not just bears. It's like all the big animals up there.
Yeah.
Um, so just knowing that it's not too much to carry something to protect yourself. But yeah, just hiking alone is also a little sketchy sometimes. Like, if you're with another person, I think it's much safer when it comes to animals.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Also, the bison on Catalina Island off of LA were pretty aggressive.
Interesting. That's funny.
A herd coming at you is a very scary thing.
Any kind of run-ins with insects or snakes that we're not fully ready for? Or, again, those are, I think, ones that people don't always think about, as kind of like a rattlesnake and kind of knowing what those signs and stuff look like.
Yeah, I don't always hike in the desert because it's just not my vibe. But when I do, I usually see snakes. And like you said, I'm not thinking about them.
Yeah.
But once you see one, you always think about them. It's like kind of traumatizing, because for the rest of like the 10 or 15 or 20 miles you have to do, it's like you're scanning for snakes the entire time. And once you see a rattlesnake and have a run in, like, you definitely don't want to leave the trail. Like, it's very sketchy to just wander off the trail in the desert. Yeah, snakes in the desert, and bugs. Bugs are another thing that are different times. So you can pick different months on a hike and have a great experience or a terrible one. Like, the midges in Scotland are terrible during a couple months. When I went, they were atrocious. Very dumb. I thought it would be okay, and I was even looking at like the midge reports. So they were showing like different colors, but it wasn't good. And then sawtooths. When I was there were pretty bad mosquitoes. I don't know if you saw mosquitoes up there.
Yeah, it was pretty laid back for me.
Yeah.
When it was actually more so that, I don't know if you dealt with this, but it was the bees that would not leave us alone. It's not that we got stung. It's just they were hanging out. Anytime you'd sit down, they were there, kind of being annoying and pesty. So that was something we had to deal with frequently. And
they weren't stinging you. They were just kind of looking for sweet things, right?
Just kind of in your face, no stinging. But it was pretty annoying.
I've never seen that before. I've definitely come across wasps that have nests on the trail, and that's when you get stung. Like, every time I come across wasps on trail, I get stung, which sucks.
Yeah, that's horrible. Yeah, it's the bugs. We got lucky with that, but I feel like that would be one thing that could easily ruin a hike, is just having to deal with being that uncomfortable and annoyed for a very consistent amount of time.
Yeah, so that's Scotland. If you stop at all, it's mainly the wind. If there's wind, it pushes away the bugs and they can't really do much. But if there's no wind on a hike, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
That's the type of hike where I'm hiking from sunrise to sunset, and as soon as I stop, I set up my tent, get inside, and spend the next 10 minutes just systematically killing all of the bugs inside my little shelter.
That's fantastic. Well, so, this is the performance playbook, and I was very interested in this because I feel like your endurance is crazy. And I know that didn't just happen overnight. Was there any specific training that you do outside of the hikes themselves to kind of be able to keep that pace like you do? Or is it just literally, we'll call it sport-specific training, and you just go on a lot of hikes?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. And just living in New York, I walk every day. when I'm here, and I love to walk, and the hiking is just an extension of that. If I'm not hiking around the world, like if I travel somewhere, I'm going for long walks. I do run as well. But I've never really weight trained or resistance trained or done anything like that. During the winter months here in New York, it just gets too cold and depressing. So I will sign up for like HIIT classes probably every January and February, just to stay sane and get some exercise while it's snowy. But yeah, I'm just happy to record my occasional runs on Strava and just hike more so than usual people. And I guess that's it.
Okay. Yeah, so most of your endurance has just been gained through literally the act itself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of cardio.
Yeah, because even on that hike, there was one other hiker that we saw, and that man was flying, and I was just blown away. He had kind of like more of a day pack than we did, but the sheer speed, and it just wasn't phased by the altitude, and you kind of sit there and you're like, damn, dude, like, how? What are you doing that I'm not? Obviously, I don't diving. There's literally no cardio, so I do no cardio. So that was kind of like a rude awakening. But one thing I did notice during this is kind of a mindset. I've hiked in Yosemite. We did the Half Dome hike, and it's like you either can let the burn have you crumble, or you can almost like start to enjoy the burn, and that like the calves just get mangled. Is there any like, especially when you're by yourself, is there any kind of like Goggins going on in your mind to keep you going, or what's like the mental piece for you?
Yeah, especially when I'm hiking by myself, I kind of like to suffer, and I'm doing like a time trial against myself. Yeah, I hiking with other people these past like year, been hiking with friends and different people. It makes me realize how kind of psychopath I go when I'm hiking by myself. Just because I have nothing else to do. When you're hiking by yourself, it's not very social. You're not talking to anyone, so there's no reason to stop. And if I have a snack or a drink, I'm hiking, I don't stop. Like I'm continuously walking. But yeah, the burns. When you're going uphill, it's like, do you want to sweat or do you not want to sweat? It's like that decision you make. And I respect it. It's probably smarter to just go slow and like not make it like a workout, because like you could hike and not make it a workout, and I think that's most people. But I always am sweating. I'm always racing myself, and I'm always just trying to, I don't know, I'm very competitive with myself, so I'm trying to go fast.
Yeah, I think there was a piece to that because I kind of fall into that little psycho realm of it's kind of fun. Like when I was going and I had that burn, it just because there's just a pace. If I'm just walking, I'm not trail running, so it's like all I have to do is ignore the burn, and it's like it's almost worse if you stop. So I was like, well, let's just keep flying. Like if we're gonna stop, let's stop. Let's have food. Let's chill. But if we go again, we're going. Like let's not stop this kind of continuum of the momentum that we have. You're pumping in like what 20 plus miles a day when you go on these 100 milers.
Yeah. So my crazy rule that I tell myself and my brother tries to make me do, he's also a hiker, is 10 before 10. So try to get 10 miles before 10 a.m., which is very hard to do.
Yeah.
But that's like the goal that I'm always trying to do. It depends on the amount of elevation. Again, the altitude, hiking at 14,000 feet is way different than 7,000 feet. I think my max I've ever done was Lake Tahoe, and that was 42 in one day.
Oh.
And that was hiking into the night. I wanted to stop, but I didn't. The most I've done recently was Scotland, and that was very flat. So easy, but I did 38 and felt pretty good. But yeah, 20 miles is probably what I'm aiming for. But yeah, there will be some very rooted old growth forest stuff with elevation up and down that will keep me under 15. And it's tough.
I think also one thing people need to recognize, especially if they don't know who you are or what you do, is you're not just doing, let's say, the 15 miles if you go on a low end. Like, you're filming, you walk, you come back, grab the camera, and then you do that as many times as you can or want to get the shots that you want. So you're almost like not necessarily doubling it, but you're adding a substantial amount of mileage. I don't know. Have you ever been able to track that, like how much that usually adds on to your hikes?
Yeah, I've tracked alongside my brother, and we've done the same day, and it was more than I thought. It's not double. It's not anywhere close to double. But that's definitely the meme and the thing that plays in people's minds when they first watch my videos. They just see me walking away from the camera, and every single clip they're thinking he's got to come back to that thing. You know, it's like, how far is he going to get away from the camera for every single clip? And it's usually I end the clip right before I turn around. So I'm trying to be efficient with the amount of time I have to walk away from the camera before grabbing it.
Yeah. Especially, I think the cool part, the creative part too, is how you set up the camera, because it's not always just putting it right on the path and you walk away from it. Like, it's a hell of a lot more intricate than that. If you're setting it up in like the woods, you're trying to like track elsewhere to have a good angle. Have you had any shots that were like, dude, that was the best shot, that was the best angle? Do you have those, or are those specifically like drone shots? What do those look like for you?
Yeah, there's always context and then how pretty the shot looks. And that usually has to do with the lighting, the moment, the time of day, whether it's sunrise, sunset, if the light is coming through in a certain way. But yeah, you can always set up the best frame for a shot, but if you get that plus the best timing light-wise, it's very excellent. And I know I've done this enough that I can see exactly what it looks like on a screen. So I'm trying to be efficient with the shots that I get. The drone stuff is good. It's tricky because it takes time. It's extra weight. I've gotten very efficient with putting a drone up and grabbing it and shooting exactly what I need. But yeah, some of the shots where it takes extra effort are the ones that people appreciate. So usually when there's a wall and sometimes like a rope or a chain to assist going up or down some exposure, that sucks. It's like, set the camera up, you go do this thing, and then you're like, all right, now I gotta come back down, get the camera, and then do it again. And then also the river crossings. So for some of those, you either have to go across, set up the camera, go back, and then come. It's always 3, instead of just 1.
Have you had any kind of like camera breaks setting it up with like maybe the wind pushing your camera over or anything random like that?
Yeah, for sure. It's usually the lens that takes the beating. So at the top of the passes where the wind is usually the culprit. I used to have a tripod that if I didn't tighten it, it would kind of, fall or slide. But now I have a good tripod. It's just the wind that gets me. So I in the back of my mind, always low stick it. So just put its center of balance down lower. Because I've never broken like to the point where I couldn't film anymore, but I've definitely had plenty of dings and scratches and bent plastic pieces. I think usually the microphone port. So there's the microphone that sits on top of the camera, and then there's the port where it plugs into the camera. If the camera falls and it hits that adapter, that usually just shatters. That's usually the worst.
I feel like a lot of your videos, you're kind of playing with new, different gear. I feel like I've been following for a good amount of time to where I've seen you film with like an iPhone, different types of mirrorless cameras. How's that experience been for you, kind of changing around? Because you've tried so many different things now. Like, what's your favorite setup to use?
Yeah, definitely a filmmaker who started hiking. So probably a different direction than most hikers who start making videos. I went to school for film and have been doing shooting and editing, almost every every day, if not every week, for the last 10, 15 years. So it's shifted over the year. I'm always testing different drones and Sony cameras versus Canon cameras. The big consistent thing has been minimalism, though. I've always been getting more and more efficient at the amount of gear that I have and just using what I have. So I only have one lens and one camera. It's a wide. I like the POV aspect, and yeah, just try to keep it simple. Once I know what I want, I lock it in.
Have you what's been like? Do you usually gravitate towards like smaller cameras? For example, I utilize a Fuji because they're just tiny and easy to use. Has Sony just been the go-to because they're the easiest for you to use and they're kind of small, or what's that look like?
Yeah, so compared to Canon, I found the Sony mirrorless cameras to be better in low light, to be simple as far as user friendliness, and then the lightweight. Yeah, so smaller lenses and smaller body. The weight and the size is a big thing for me because I've done some work with Panasonic before, but the cameras that they were having me work with were huge, very big, very heavy. So I've tested GoPro. I did a 6 months just with iPhone only, and I've definitely tested the quality versus the weight and the ease. And a Sony A7S Mark III with like a 16 to 35 and a microphone on top is the sweet spot for all the metrics.
For someone just wanting to get basic footage, they're going to lightly copy you, but they're just more so going for the experience of, hey, I want to film what I do, show my friends. What would you suggest is the best setup for that?
Within the Sony line, the RX 100 would probably be it. It's a built-in lens, but it's wide and telephoto. It's got a little flip-up screen. I think it would be in good light. Most people wouldn't be able to tell the difference between that and my camera. There are, to someone who does it for a living, they'd be able to tell, and especially during low light and movement and of course sound quality, there would be telltale signs. But for $500, $600, I think most people would be able to throw this on auto and shoot and have it look very good. But what you have is what's best. It's a little difficult shooting with an iPhone just because you have to have a certain type of tripod if you're shooting tripod stuff with like the magnet. But yeah, I think like $500 you could probably get a good little camera.
Okay. So getting away from the iPhone would probably be the smartest move because you're not only getting better footage, but you're probably saving your battery so you can utilize that on the maps and stuff like that.
Yeah. I considered having two iPhones when I was doing the iPhone only, just to save on battery and have one recording and one like recording the trail. So yeah, you're right. And it depends on how you film. I stay away from the handheld stuff, but iPhone is pretty good for stabilization. The camera that I use, if you try to do handheld, it would be a bit shaky. And I'd say most of what people film is too shaky. So the iPhone's good for that. Just not good in low light.
Yeah. When it comes to, because you even said you like to be more minimalistic when it comes to even filmmaking and, the pack that you carry. What do you see most people bringing that they just do not need that brings a lot of weight?
Yeah, extra clothes for one. So just being willing to be dirty and wear the same thing over and over again until you get off trail, I think is where most normal people get hung up, and they have to learn the hard way by bringing too much and overpacking. I would say cooking stuff as well. Like, it's not like you can have a cup, but every time I see someone's mug or cup dangling on the outside of their pack, it drives me insane. It's like, one, if it's dangling and moving on the outside of your pack, it's like, it's going to distract you and be annoying. And if it makes noise, that's the worst. Like, I just feel like everything should be within your pack or like tight. It's like if you're running with a running vest, it's so much better if it's tight on you than loose. It's like everything's moving. So I think that's a no-brainer. But every time I go to a trail that has beginners, you can tell they have a big pack and they're wearing too much. They're just always wearing pants and boots, and they usually have that little mug dangling on the outside. Yeah, just dingling, dingling.
For your case, you're trying to go for speed, and you're trying to make sure that you can be as light as possible because you're kind of flying through these things. What are things that people could add that you don't necessarily add that are super beneficial that would make sense?
For people to go faster?
Just the more so to enjoy their trip, not to add too much weight, but this is like a good logical thing to bring that you would probably suggest most people have.
Yeah, I think a weak point for a lot of beginners, and even me at the beginning, were socks and boots and blisters and feet. Because once you get a blister on your foot, every step is a nightmare, and it makes you just less efficient overall. So many people start a hike with like brand new hiking boots or shoes, and that's kind of silly. You should it'd be better if you just wore your everyday sneakers compared to brand new hiking boots, just because they're not going to give you blisters. But some socks are just not good for hiking. Like you really do want thick socks. Yeah, not getting blisters, but at this point, I hike well enough that I don't get blisters anymore.
Yeah, that's good.
But that's good. If it's warm enough, like just wearing shorts, I think just makes it a nicer experience hiking. When it's hot out and I see people sweating with pants on, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand. When there's bugs out, that's when you want pants. Yeah. And when you're cold, yeah, when you stop at camp or you stop to take a break at the top of a pass, yeah, you can put some pants on. But my legs do not get cold if you're just continuously walking. I don't understand people who just like wear pants and sweat all day.
Yeah.
Seems silly.
You actually, you kind of just reminded me. I'm assuming you probably know who Billy Yang is.
Yeah. We got breakfast a couple weeks ago here in New York City.
Oh yeah. He's got some really cool films, and one of his, he does the John Muir Trail, or at least a pretty large section of it. And I just remember him getting the worst blisters, and it just like ruining his entire trip. So your suggestion there is just having it. Would it be like wool socks would make the most sense?
Yeah. So Darn Tough is the name of the socks that they're indestructible. Okay. I never get blisters with them. I just love them to death. Yeah. I just feel like they're a no-brainer.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he makes some pretty cool stuff. He's trying to convince me to do an ultra next year, so we'll see if that happens.
That'd be sick. The other funny part that when you brought up just even wearing like running shoes, the person that I went on a hike with, a friend of mine, he had the choice between Nike shoes and Timberlands. And he puts on the Timberlands, and he got the worst feet problem. And just watching that was kind of funny, but it was tragic because that kind of ruins your hike. You think that like these boots, well, they're boots, but you want something a little bit more efficient.
Yeah.
Your shoe game has, I feel like, has it been more consistent, or have you tried just a bunch of different shoes and found the perfect fit for you?
Yeah, it's been a balance of me starting out and knowing nothing about shoes and just exploring on my own, trying different things, looking, this person hikes a lot, what do they use? But also brands reaching out, sending me free shoes. So that definitely sways. When you have free shoes, you don't want to throw them away. You want to use them. So Brooks sent me a bunch, and I did like them. They were definitely trail runners more than boots. I'm definitely a trail runner kind of guy. But the Salomon Speed Cross with the quick laces, they're more of a cleat. They're like almost a little hard to wear on pavement when you first get them. They're so high. But But yeah, they've been pretty good. I've tried Allbirds, I've tried Hoka's, I've tried a bunch of different. The Solomons are my favorite. And this week I'm actually shooting my annual favorite hiking gear video. So I have like the big list of all the stuff that I used this year and gonna make the rundown. So it's definitely been on my mind. And year after year though, the sun hoodie is the biggest thing. So
Yeah,
that's also the other recommendation against the sun. You know, I don't like wearing sunscreen, especially when I sweat, because it's messy and no fun. So looking a little stupid and having a sun hoodie with the thumb holes just to like keep the sun off my skin and not burn, game changer.
that was one of the things I copied you for, and it was fantastic. It was actually such a good piece to have. I was actually blown away on, because I was like, I saw it, and I was like, these are kind of dorky, but it seems like a good idea. And I'm in the same boat. Like, even when I dove outside, I didn't put on sunscreen, which was probably a bad idea. But yeah, it's that sun hoodie. Like, even at night, just to have that extra layer was really beneficial. It's super breathable. That was a great addition.
Yep. And you know, seeing other people wearing the sun hoodie is always fun. It's still in the works, but that'll probably be the first merch that I drop in development with a company.
That'd be sweet.
Just making it like the perfect sun hoodie that I would want. You know, small changes from what I've learned. So we'll see.
Have you ever tried, like, historically, for me, I've had really bad patellar tendonitis. And so I actually had to move to barefoot shoes, and that helped relieve a lot of pain for me. And so actually the first time I wore barefoot shoes, which I don't think anyone should do this, but I went on the Yosemite hike in barefoot shoes for the first time, and my feet were actually mangled after that, because like they weren't used to that type of that much like load, we'll say. Have you ever tried backpacking or even hiking with barefoot shoes?
Yeah, I've got is it Vivo?
Yeah, Vivos.
Yeah, I've got a pair behind me. The company is trying to get me to be a wearer. And I've tried them. Like I remember trying them a couple years ago as well. It's the same thing. It's just so different than what you're used to.
Yeah.
And I could kind of brute force my way into doing it. It would take some time to get used to, but at the end of the day, I just like these shoes, these other shoes with padding, they're nice.
Yeah.
Why change?
Yeah. Especially when you're going on hikes that are like that long. Like the backpacking trip for me was like 13 miles round trip. So it was, that's nothing. Like when I go to Europe, and I'm wearing my barefoot shoes, like I walk the same distance. So like it's pretty comparable. But when you're pumping out 100 miles and you're doing the extra work of going back and forth, I feel like that extra padding would probably make sense in that circumstance.
Yeah, it's much better to hedge your bets with a smaller hike, or just wear them around town for the previous month, just to know that you can.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, 100%. So running back to the beginner, what would be perfect intro backpacking routes that you would throw out there that you've probably hit yourself?
You know, something that you can drive to is always better than something you could fly to. I guess I've been shooting more international stuff just because that's more exciting to me. And if I do domestic in the US, I typically wouldn't film it because I'm going with family or my wife or my dog, and it's just like a different experience rather than work. So yeah, if you live in Colorado, hike in Colorado, lots of stuff in California. The East Coast is a different kind of beast. I grew up with the Adirondacks, the middle of the country. Have fun in the flats. There's not much.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
You know, every country usually has something, but the Alps hit a little differently than, you know, volcanoes in Guatemala. Everything has a different flavor. I like to hike international because there's the added culture as well. So buildings, food, animals, people, it's all fun instead of just in the US, you know, it's same old with some nature.
Yeah. If you had and maybe we can end it off here because I think this is an interesting question to kind of throw at you. If you had like you're at a bar, quick pitch to get someone to go backpacking, what would that be?
I think hiking is the best way to travel, in my opinion. You typically get away from people. It's cheaper, and it has put me in the middle of farmland unexpectedly. When you hike in some of the South America, Central America, South Asian countries, you're hiking alongside farmers who are growing vegetables that you've never seen before. They're the friendliest people. It's where dogs and animals will come up to you and be curious. Yeah, some of my most pleasant memories have been staying and sleeping at farms, getting to know the people who are growing stuff there, and just like learning about like farms and how water moves and just how people live differently instead of the kind of overwhelming and sometimes fakeness of cities and the tourist areas of Bangkok or Hong Kong or Bogota. It just puts you in a different headspace. And now I find myself, once I land in a new country, I immediately get out of the big city and try to get into nature, get into a better headspace. I feel better. And then once I do the hike, then I can go back to the city and be at a better mental place to explore. And because travel is all about, being vulnerable and opening yourself up to new experiences. So you kind of have to get far away from the comforts of home in the city before you can fully be a good traveler.
That's beautiful. Well, Kraig, I really appreciate your time, and this has been very very eye-opening for some things that we can change for our hiking and add. And I'm excited for that merch to come out. I'll probably be one of the first people to buy it. That's going to be sweet. So thank you for your time, and I'm super happy we had you on.
Yeah, you're definitely like a curious person. Your questions were good, and I can tell that you're going to continue to hike. And anytime we're in the same area, we can definitely hit up a trail and hit some trails up.
Perfect. All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.